welcome back to the Backseat Admiral and Ion Radio. If you're in the chat, let me know if you can hear me. Today is January 31st. End of the first month of January already. It's already going so fast. And tonight we're going to be talking about episode 7 of season 3. Looks like we already have some people in chat. I see Jacob and Skull and Ken and Krogo Magnum is in the chat with us tonight. So just making sure my mic works, and we're going to talk about some weird fleets that I came up with this. So I'm quiet this time. Okay, well, give me a second. Let me open up settings and see if I can work on anything real fast. That is under devices. Mic. Hate how it's not mic anymore. Like Windows changes settings on you. And then it's like, oh, you don't have access to that anymore. System, sound, master. I think that might be a little bit better. Let me go under mic settings in OBS and see if that's any louder. Any louder so far? So far, is it louder? Probably not. Properties, there it is. I have no settings I can really change, so this is basically what it is. Sorry, guys. So today we're going to be talking about the masters of the command dials. We have Admiral Thrawn and Admiral Trench, and things that I'm very opinionated on between these two commanders, which, big surprise, that's me. So let's go ahead and jump on into it. Actually, before that, I want to give a big shout out. I really wish I could have been there this weekend for the LVO. But they had a full 40 people turn out, which is huge for Armada. I don't even think the last LVO that I played at... okay, good. Maybe the two buttons that I could click off actually worked, and you guys can hear me better. But I don't think the last LVO that I went to, which was like now 2-some years ago, had the turnout of 40 people, which is incredible. So a couple of my people that I used to play with all the time and we're in my playtest group, went and did quite well. Jack, who I stole his list for, I believe, last week's episode. Honestly, I didn't realize that he was going to be using it. I was reading in Discord that he was going to switch from Republic and play probably Imperial or something like that for the competitive season. So I'm like, whatever. I would have released it this Saturday, so then I wouldn't be giving away any of his secrets. My bad, sorry. But he did well. He placed 16th, made it to day 2 overall. And then my other friend Nick, who I went with Nova a couple years ago with, he was like he was top table, so you can actually watch a couple of his games live streamed, and he's a really good player, and he ended up, I believe, 9th overall. So congrats out to them for placing well on that. But anyhow, let's get to building strange Star Destroyers. So this battle, imagined up by Ken and myself, we really just wanted to do Thrawn and Trench because they're kind of the same basic theory on what to do with them, or ability to superpower your ships with multiple commands per turn. So I got stuck with Grand Admiral Thrawn, who I prefer. I don't like Trench. You can see previous Backseat Admirals and me ranting about how I don't think he's efficient for the CIS faction because he's too gimmicky for what he does. So we came up with 2 lists, and the Thrawn list that I came with, it wasn't the Thrawn list that I originally came with, because I honestly thought kind of was going to go like bomber heavy, so I made a really mean Thrawn fighter bomber list. And when Ken and I were talking about our lineups of what we would like to face against who for the season and everything like that, I'm like, I'm looking forward to my Thrawn bombers beating up on your trench bombers. And he's like, no, that's not going to go well. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, I'm not bringing a bomber list of any kind. I'm like, then you're not going to probably have fun against this list. And so I was describing my list to him. And he's like, I don't know if this will be a good matchup. I'm like, okay, well, you have the choice between that or this insanely weird build that I've been thinking up for a long time with a Super Star Destroyer. And he's like, okay, let's go with that. That sounds weird. And so that's what I brought to the table. So let's talk about how to make a Super Star Destroyer that's not really efficient, but do some really weird things that no one else really does. So we have the Super Star Destroyer. It's going to be a Dreadnought Assault prototype, because I like the super strong front arc. And it's going to be Grand Admiral Thrawn. So just talking about learning about the game and things like that. So Super Star Destroyer, the huge ship, when you reveal a dial, you gain a similar token. So now let's tape Grand Admiral Thrawn on top of that. Thrawn gains a dial. He doesn't reveal a dial. So let's say I reveal a navigation with the SSD, I gain a nav token. If Thrawn then gives me a concentrate fire, I don't get a concentrate fire token with that. It's the same thing with Piet, is because it's not being revealed. And that's the key word there. When you reveal your command, you get a matching token. When you're gaining dials, you don't. So Thrawn's not necessarily the best person to use with a Super Star Destroyer, except you could push a ton of fighters with him. So that's something to consider. But yeah, he doesn't gain that much ability. So then I came up with this idea that let's do a salvo build. And also, let's use the Executor title. So what the Executor title does is it allows me to infinitely stack any type of token on the ship. It ignores the limit of being limited to what your command value is, and it also ignores the fact that you can't normally have more than the same type of token on your ship. And there's really very few reasons why you would want multiple tokens of the same type on your ship, because you can't really spend them because you only can resolve them once. So if I'm going to go with let's infinitely stack tokens on here, the things that I have to consider is, do I want to then be running the other Star Dreadnought, the command version that has the command cards, so then I can get multiple fleet commands each turn? And I decided that wasn't really going to be fun, because I want to do the salvo. And if I went the other route, then I would want gunnery teams, and you can't have both because cards. So I decided, let's find another gimmick that I could just infinitely use tokens for, and that is Lyra Locus, another card that you've never seen used before. And what she does is, when you are dealt a face-up damage card, you may spend 1 engineering token to flip that card face down without resolving its effect. So normally, this would be a once maximum per turn pretty much effect, except if you have the Executor. And what's nice about the SSD and the Executor title with that is it has enough shields that I should be able to shunt the shields around long enough that I'm able to collect enough tokens, so when I start taking hull damage, which I will be taking crits because it's 22 hull, I can just toss it out of the way and avoid taking those damage cards. Seems pretty good to me. Also, it is when you're dealt a face-up damage card, it's not dealt a crit. So let's say if you get hit with APT, that's a critical effect, so your contain won't block that, but she does, because it doesn't care that it's a special critical effect. It only cares about being a face-up damage card. Same with asteroids. Like, you could just run over asteroids for days and it doesn't matter. So now that I have some gimmicks laid out, I want to do salvo, and I want to collect tokens so I can use Lyra. So let's start planning how we can gain as many tokens as possible to stack on the Super Star Destroyer. So let's just say Super Star Destroyers like either engineering or they like concentrate fire. Well, I'm not needing to trigger gunnery teams with this ship, so I don't need to do concentrate fire, so it's going to be straight engineering. So that means every single turn revealing a dial with the Super Star Destroyer, I gain an engineering token, click. And then if I don't need to engineer right now, I then get to decide what I do with that dial, which I turn it into a token. So on the first turn, I should have 2 engineering tokens. And I can just keep stacking 2 engineering tokens every single turn, just like that. Then we throw my best friend Vanto into the Coco co-pilot seat, and he's like, oh, if you do a command, I'll give you a token. I'm like, I really want more engineering tokens. He's like, I got you. So then Grand Admiral Thrawn makes me do a dial, navigate, so now I can turn. And after I do that, I get another engineering token. So that's like 3 engineering tokens a turn as long as I'm doing Grand Admiral Thrawn things. Pretty good. But now let's think about how I can make it, because I got that gimmick going. And it's fun and all taking damage and then ignoring crits, but I don't really want to take damage. I want to kill your ships. So how can we do that? The Super Star Destroyer is still extremely powerful out of its front arcs. So I don't really need gunnery teams. I can gun down pretty much 1 ship a turn with it just automatically. But I'm going to take a lot of fire because it's going to be really the only ship that you're going to be shooting at. So let's throw the Emperor at it. So then you have to spend a token every single time that you do that. Perfect. Now, let's go to the salvo. So a Super Star Destroyer has the Evil Rainbow out the back. Cool. Well, if we take local fire control, then I can replace one of the contains, which I don't need anymore because of Lyric. And I can replace it with a salvo. Do you really want to be salvoed by a Super Star Destroyer? No. So the idea of this is first or second player doesn't really matter to me because you attack me, I flip the Emperor, or the Emperor triggers, you have to exhaust 1 of your defense tokens. Most ships have 3, so that's 1 of them exhausted. Then I salvo you back, because honestly you're probably not going to block the salvo because you want to block all the other fun juicy things that are better. And then I hit you with a salvo. So now you're going to spend more defense tokens. Because I got DB Weiss, and that black dice is automatically 2 hits, plus whatever I rolled. Perfect. Then I get to attack you. And whatever's left of your defense tokens is probably going to disappear pretty quickly. And if you are a Republic or Gar or any of the nonsense that the Rebels are doing with salvo nowadays, if you're going to salvo me, you have to pretty much discard all your defense tokens. So in 1 turn, you shouldn't have defense tokens, and I'm not even using Intel Officer. So, or you die. One of the 2 things. So that's pretty much the build. Flat guns are there to get extra range. Leading shots are there because red dice are primarily what's out the front, and they're red dice, and I would like to re-roll them. XI7s say, I don't care, you have a redirect, I block your brace, take 12 damage. And that's pretty much the build. That's really the only idea. The problem with that, though, is that I ran into this point that I didn't have really enough points that I really wanted to do anything with. So I ended up just going with a Corvus Raider 1, because I had the points for it. Like, I could have just brought what would be a second Gazanti, but then I would have like a 30-point bid, and I don't need a 30-point bid. And I also don't want to bring any fighters because I don't want anything easy for the opponent to really kill. What the Corvus allows me to do is it just allows me to plop it on the table as a free activation deployment, see where you go, and then I can move it to wherever it's safe or wherever I need it. Cool. Last ship is a Gazanti with Hondo, so hey, I would like an engineering token, please, and a navigate. Perfect. And then CommsNet just allows me to throw more tokens. So theoretically, if I'm not needing to use that engineering, I could generate engineering free token from the SSD. SSD dial turned into a token. Thrawn gives me a nav. I use that. I get a Vanto engineering. Comsnet Gazanti gives me an engineering. So that's theoretically I could get 4 engineering tokens a turn. Pretty awesome. I think I got up to a total of, what was it? 12 tokens on the ship at the same time, which is absurd because you don't really ever need that many. So that's really the whole idea of the build. That's it. How many tokens I can get, and then I'm going to salvo you. And if I kill you, I kill you. It's still a super Star Destroyer. I don't need to kill all of your ships in one turn because you're not going to kill me in one turn because very few fleets have the firepower to take down an SSD unless you're super gimmicky as well. So I'm just going to collect tokens, play the token collecting game. Not victory tokens, command tokens. I'm going to salvo you a couple times, and the Emperor is going to make you spend all your tokens, so when I punch you really hard right in the face. And if I get to go first, and you basically have to use all your defense tokens to try to stay alive, then you're going to spend them off of yourself when you attack me. And that's fun. So that's the build. That's all I came in with the expectations of if we're going to play who can manipulate tokens and dials and things like that the best. That would be this guy. And I will collect all the tokens and put them on my ship. So then Ken has this trench list. And as we discussed earlier, he did not go the route of trench bombers. He went with the route of trench using concentrated fire / engineering shenanigans, which I actually think is a better version of it. And I've gone into that before of why I don't think it's efficient to try to use squadron tokens with trench to power trench, because you really don't need that for how well the CIS actually controls their squadrons. Like, it's just gimmicky, and you could have just done squadrons to begin with and then used any other commander and it would have been better. That's really my problem with trench, is you could use any of the other CIS commanders better for less points. So he has a Providence class carrier. That's the special one that allows you to carry a defensive retrofit. So Admiral Trench, electronic countermeasures, ordnance pod in case I came with a ton of fighters, point defense ion cannons, which does work against things, dual turbo laser turrets. Not a fan of the card. Ken is, I am not. Invincible, which allows to take a second defensive retrofit, and he has thermal shields on that. People were making comments on, I think, Discord asking why to bring both and not something else. And I actually agree with it, because sometimes you really need ECM. And other times you really need thermal shields. And the times that you don't need one, you clearly need the other one. And if you look at what other things that you could bring, it doesn't really benefit a Providence. So the other things you could bring is like Advanced Projector, which costs more points. And you only have one redirect. So like it doesn't really help you, because you're not going to be able to really shift the shields around. And like your shields are only 2 on the back. And it would be easier just to do an engineering to move those shields forward than to spend whatever, 8 points, 7 points, something really expensive for Advanced Projectors when your shields aren't really that high to transfer it around. The other one is EWS, Early Warning System, so you could block when you were tokens. Well, the problem is with the Providence, it has that like perfectly like split. I'm trying to do firing arcs. It's like right down the line, so if you're looking at them on the front, if you're just slightly curved, they can still shoot your side, so they just choose to ignore whatever arc you have the EWS on. So it doesn't really help you that much unless you're able to like perfectly 90-degree into them so they can't shoot your side. And that's kind of hard when ships are moving around, especially like an SSD that has mean arcs on all sides. And like, so you're in an arc, you're in an arc, you're in an arc, and you're going to be in an arc the entire game. And then the other one that you could use, I guess, is the reinforced blast doors, which I feel like if you really want to have all of your crits stay face up the entire game, you bring reinforced blast doors so you just never get any use out of it, or your ship dies right before you need to use it. That's my experience with it. So Having electronic countermeasures counters large dice pools that add into them. And thermal shields blocks large dice pools that don't add dice into them, like the front of an SSD. So I can see why both of them are useful on this, because you don't know necessarily what's going to come against you. Like, if you're going to be attacked by something, let's just say silly, like a hammerhead scout with Leia and slave turrets, thermal shields is completely useless, because you're going to start with 2 red dice. You're going to use thermal shields. One of the red dice goes away. Slave turrets come in. Now you're at 2 dice. And then Leia comes in. You're at 3 dice with a reroll. So you might as well just hold on to your brace to use it later on. And that's when electronic countermeasures comes into effect. Like, oh, they somehow got an accuracy on 4 red dice. I can still half it. So it just takes some consideration. This just keeps it alive. This is a tanky ship. Okay, so the next one is a Munificent class comms frigate with rune, disposable, so you can get those 2 blue dice out at farther range, and then link turbo laser towers, which just comes with the ship. It just automatically stapled to it. I don't really like disposable capacitors, except Ken's been using it for a long time with these ships, wrecking me out the front arc with it. I usually get my Munificents in like super close range. So there's usually maybe 1 turn to use disposable, and I'm like, maybe I don't really need it, but Ken uses it quite well against me with rune, so you can generate tokens, so you can use trench. Then you have the exact same thing with Teaks, so you can gain tokens, so you can use trench. And then he has a hard sell with munitions resupply to hand out concentrate fires. Like I said, his plan was to use mainly concentrate fire with trench, so you can add a die, reroll a die with trench's ability. And then Beast of Burden to redo tokens. The problem is with the Super Star Destroyer, I can eliminate so many tokens so fast, you're probably not going to be able to flip anything useful back. So that's just something to take into consideration. And that's the 2 fleets. They were kind of just what they are. Let's jump over to, give me 1 sec. Let's jump to objectives. So I had the bid, and before I knew what this was, this is actually almost the exact same thing that I would have handed Ken if I was second player. Because I'm like, what would be awesome is to have an advanced gunnery player 2 Super Star Destroyer, because getting hit 3 times in the same arc by a Super Star Destroyer is just pretty juicy. So no one would ever pick that. And then I think my other things were like contested outposts, because I'll just sit on it all game, and probably superior positions, because that's fun. Not superior positions, Solar Corona, because then I can see where your fleet is. Let me pull up my fleet just to verify. Yeah. Actually, no, I had Advanced Gunnery, Fleet and Bean, and Solar Corona. So the reason why I would bring Fleet and Bean is that I'm a Command 4 ship, and I would get 4 tokens. So if you attack me, I use my salvo, and then you attack me with a different ship or the same ship, and I'm like, hey, I will refresh that salvo immediately, and then just hit you again with it. So you don't want to click or select that. So you pretty much are stuck taking Solar Corona. So you deploy your whole fleet, and then I put my Super Star Destroyer in the perfect spot to just steamroll straight through it, killing 1 ship a turn. That's kind of the plan as second player. Except I would prefer to go first because I'm a Super Star Destroyer. So Ken handed me this juicy thing, and I saw Advanced Gunnery, and I did not care what any of the other objectives were. I just picked Advanced Gunnery because I don't have gunnery teams on my stuff. I don't care if I shoot one of your hull zones once. I still got to use 3 attacks out the front. Perfect. And then the other ones were Fleet Ambush and Volatile Deposits, which Fleet Ambush could be fun too, because then I would just be like, here's Corvus in the middle, you put a ship down. Here's my transport, you put another ship down. Here's the Super Star Destroyer in your deployment zone, and that would have been fun, but not as fun as Advanced Gunnery. If I had gunnery teams, then it would have been Fleet Ambush. And then Volatile Deposits, which I would never pick with a super. Like, that would be terrible. So that's the fleets. and the ideas behind them. So if you guys put any comments or thoughts into the comments section, I will take a look at them and read them, and then I'll talk about how the game progressed and go from there. Okay, let's see. Talking about my sound, masters the command dials, and you leave out Bail Organa. Yeah, he's not really known as being a super strategic person. So, like, you have Trench, who's, like, smelling the opponent's strategy, and Thrawn, who's analyzing their art. And then you have Bail, who's a senator. So he doesn't really fit into the same fun narrative. That's why we didn't throw him in there. We could throw him against any of these things. I think Thrawn outdoes Bail. I still don't like Trench, so Bail's probably better than that. But that's why we didn't throw him in there. He gets a couple dials, but he doesn't give, like, fleet-wide abilities. He gives a ship ability. It's the same thing, like Tarkin. Both the Tarkins give out command tokens. They do it differently. Maybe seeing that in the future, just spoiler. But these Tarkins give fleet-wide dials to their potential ships, while Bail gives one dial or two dials out to specific ships, not like a fleet-wide type thing. Everyone has been boxed inside for too long. Now it's game time. That's about LVO. I agree. I wish I was there. Just didn't work out. Maybe next year. So what's frustrating is, I think I've talked about this on Backseat before, like having a baby right now, I'm not going to be flying anywhere in the country or attending any games because that's more important, the baby, than plastic ships. But like, also, every single game tournament that has been announced so far this whole year lands on my weekend to work. So working in healthcare, I work every other weekend, and I work night shift, so it's like difficult to do things obviously during the day, even locally. But if there's like an odd and an even week for the whole year, and I work the even week, every single tournament's on a even week. So LVO's on a even week, Adepticon's on an even week. A local tournament that they're throwing up next month at one of the stores is on an even week. Like, I can't trade with people. There's only one other person that I could trade with, so he's not going to take all my weekend shifts. That makes no sense. So, like, I'm just really out of luck with that. So maybe LVO next year will be on my odd week, so I can fly out to Vegas and hang out with people and do that. I played a local casual tournament on Saturday and put thermal shields on my munificence. It really saved my bacon against ignition attacks. Yes, it does. It works really well against the salvo and against the onagers attack. Like, thermal shields is like a hard counter to a lot of that. Then you have Ken, who rolls like crazy good. So it's like, I'll cut out all your black dice. Okay, we'll roll four red dice in, and then concentrate fire in for a total of, I'll block whatever is useful with an accuracy and take 6 damage. And you're like, oh, and you still have that crit? Perfect. But yeah, they do work against that, especially like that blue ignition, spat attack. Like, knock out your blue and a couple knock out the black and a handful of blues, like, is really, really nice. Because while blue dice are just straight consistent damage, when you reduce the number of them and you're like, well, you got 2 blue dice, that's 2 damage. Okay, I'm fine with that. I'll take 2 damage. Even if I don't use tokens, I'll take 2 damage over multiple blacks, and then blacks being concentrated in and things like that. Okay, Skull. What's the overall thought process around posting lists for a matchup versus competitive pseudo-competitive lists? If you don't mind, Skull, go a little bit more into what you mean by that. Like, what is a competitive list versus what is, like, what I normally have been playing on the channel? Like, what's your specific question to that? And then I'll get right back to that. My buddy works 7 days on, 7 days off, and all the local tournaments have been on his week to work. I bet your friend might be a pharmacist. But yeah, I feel that pain. It's like always. It's like I normally I would have to take a day off anyway, just because of flipping over to night shift, and then like Adepticon, I think like their main tournament's on a Friday, so even if I had that day off, I would probably work the Thursday night, and doing a 4+ rounds of Armada is exhausting if you have a full night's sleep before. It's just impossible to do if you've been up at that point for like 24 hours. Like, your brain doesn't function. Yeah, so I feel like it always happened on one of my weekends or things like that. I'm trying to think. I think the only reason I went to Worlds was I got a trade last time, and it worked out that someone took my weekend because they needed a day off, or took it out of their kindness of their heart for me so that I could go for it. Okay, Skull. The theme matchups versus something more currently competitive over kind of a gimmick. And so sometimes Ken and I think I get what you're saying. So blind matchups. Sometimes Ken and I just come up with ideas that we want certain commanders to go against each other because it would be fun. So like, for instance, this is a Thrawn versus Trench because they run the same thing, and then we just build a random list around it. And one thing that we do on the channel is, like, we could play competitive lists and belay the same competitive list over and over and over again, except that gets really, really boring to watch. That's up to you. You can go find channels that will do the same list every single week, or I changed one card in a list, and that's really not enjoyable to me to watch. So we are more of a variety show. You're not going to get like, here's a competitive list every week that we're going to be tweaking, or here's just random lists. Like, we run anything, and it's for enjoyment. That's kind of the idea behind what we do on the channel. So while sometimes we do have a competitive list, like, I'll pre-warn Ken, like in season 1, I think I brought a couple like hardcore competitive lists. And it would be like, I think I told him I'm going to bring a competitive list based around Thrawn. That's the last time I played Thrawn. And it was like the list that won, I believe, one of the Novas or some big tournament. I'm like, just so you know, this is like a legit list, so bring something that's good against it. Like, be prepared. Like, put some extra thought into making a good list. And I think he brought an Akbar list, and he's like, I like Akbar, and Akbar's typically pretty competitive, and I just out deployed him, got in his face, and wrecked, because it's a super competitive list. Or sometimes we'll be like, we would like a fighter match. Who would be two very good fighter commanders to put against each other? Spoiler, our next episode is exactly that. Who's the strongest Imperial fighter commander? That would be Sloane. So Ken's taken Sloane, and I'm like, who's the strongest Rebel fighter commander that I haven't played recently? That's Riken. Let's play Sloane versus Riken. So then Ken builds a list that's Sloane versus Riken, and I build a list that's Sloane versus Riken, and then we just smash them together. That's pretty much how we do things when we plan a season. And like this season, what we ended up doing, so season 3 and 4, keeping with the variety show idea, we actually split all the commanders because it comes out to be like perfect. Like, there's 18 commanders for each of us if we each use each commander once, and then we can do whatever we want on the 10th episode. So that's 9 episodes of whatever commander we want. And we kind of did a draft, and then we took people's lists that they submitted to us on Patreon and a couple from Discord and things like that, and be like, oh, that person has that commander, that's the fleet for that. And then we just build lists, and then I just go through like what would be fun to watch. Like Thrawn versus Trench. That's kind of a cool idea of who's the supreme ruler of the command dials for the whole fleet. And then next week, like, who's the best fighter commander for Rebels versus Imperials? Riken, who's the old classic of he still probably needs a nerf, or Sloane, who people are like, she needs a nerf. Like, they're both pretty OP and they're both really good at running fighters, so let's smash them together. So that's kind of how we do it. And honestly, like, when you're coming up with, so I came up with, for between seasons 3 and 4, 20 lists. I can't tell you what I have in any of those lists anymore. Like, that was 4 months ago that I came up with it. So when we come to the game, I have no clue what Ken brought, because I barely remember what I brought for my objectives and things like that. So that's kind of how we do it. So we don't really play competitive lists because we don't need to. So I enjoy bringing jank. So that's pretty much all I bring. Like, look at this Super Starty story. This isn't competitive. It's nowhere near competitive. I brought this anywhere to any store, even just a friendly match. This would get obliterated. Or I do what this happens, and someone didn't expect me to bring, like, weird jank, because it's nowhere on anyone's radar of, let's collect tokens, and you're going to have a salvo Super Star Destroyer. And sometimes that just throws people off, because who would expect that? So it's not competitive. I wouldn't bring it to any tournament. And honestly, like, most of my fleets that I would bring to tournament, you would be like, I can't believe John would bring, Sloniger to a tournament. Well, it's really good. Sloniger is really good. And if you looked at what was winning LVO, like, on that final day, it's like Onager versus Onager, Onager versus Onager, 2 Onagers versus Onager, an Onager and Interdictors, because their point fortresses is what ended up winning. That's not fun. I hate the Onager. But to be competitive, I would have to bring it. And I don't really want to just be like, here's Onager against Onager versus Interdictor, and Onager protecting an Interdictor, and I'm going to point farm for the entire game, because it's not a fun game to play, let alone really watch. So that's kind of how I think about it. Let's see what Ken says. We used to do blind matchups. Yeah, we used to do completely blind matchups, and that's like early days. Like, we wouldn't even tell each other who the commander was, and we would just show up with a fleet, and sometimes that came up with some really, really, really lopsided, like, I came to fight fighters today. Every single one, and I think Ken actually did that once. He's like, John always runs fighters, so I'm going to bring something, and every single one of his ships had, like, quad batteries and, like, anti-squadron stuff, and I'm like, well, that's funny, because today I have 0 fighters, and, like, it looks like we set it up then for me to just annihilate, because, like, Ken had like 100 points of anti-squadron in his list, and I had 0 squadrons. Like, we try to avoid that. Sometimes we have crazy days. Yeah, like the Z95 list, I warned Ken for like 2 seasons of planning. I'm like, I have this idea, and it's super memey, and you need to make a meme list to be like toned down in scale. So other channels actually do this too. Like, if you've ever heard of like the Warhammer community, what's their name? Tabletop Titans. They take a lot of flack, those guys, for bringing not competitive lists to the table to play. And then they end up going to like the tournaments, and they win. Like, those players are like top world-class players, and they win a lot of the tournaments. And people are like, oh, we didn't know you could play competitive. They're like, yeah, of course we can play competitively. We just choose not to, because we have to play 3 games a week, because I think they do 3 live streams or something like that, minimally a week, of different armies, and they just bring different units because they want to have fun. And that's kind of like what we do on the channel. Who's the best Republic squadron commander? That's actually a hard choice, because Bale's actually pretty good at it. And then you have Plo Koon, and if you can get through their fighters, you can just bomb someone to oblivion. So my vote's always Plo Koon, because I really like Plo Koon. Have you ever played through a scenario like Rebellion in the Rim? Not only have we played through a scenario of Rebellion in the Rim, we have recorded 2 Rebellion in the Rim full campaigns that you can check out on our channel, James. If you go under playlists, they're organized. The one's called Rebellion in the Rim, and then the other one's cleverly called Return to the Rim, because that's our number 2. Skull. Yeah, I was mostly just thinking about how it was planned for a season, if every episode was planned way ahead of time, or was there a blind matchup? So we're pseudo planned ahead, like I said. So we plan on what type of commander matchups we want to build, or type of arcs that we want to build against. Like what I was saying, like we wanted to do the fleet organized across giving command dials. And then we just build it, and then we like post it. We have like files that we keep track of everything. And then like we forget about it because we plan literal months in advance. Like we already done with planning for season 4, and we're not even done with season 3. We have Madness already done, and that's going to be next. And we've already both have fleets for season 5 and season 6 done. So we plan way in advance. So by the time we get to like the actual match, like we talked about it like 2-3 months ago. So it's a fresh game that neither of us know what's going on. We just knew that this would be a good matchup from the beginning. James, on the channel to clarify. Yes, on the channel specifically, we have the 2 Rebellion and the Rim completed campaigns. And then we also have videos that we do that we talk about our thoughts on it. And in our Discord, we have, I don't know if you really want to scroll through like way back in history of the Discord, but we talk heavily with a lot of people about a lot of our thoughts on the games. Ken mentions that. Yep. And what about Yularen? I don't really like Yularen. You already takes the faction that's most efficient at activating squadrons. Aven 2 is like the most powerful squadron activation that you can possibly get, and then you get a little bit more powerful. The problem with Gar is that at max capacity of their fighter activations, it is hard to activate enough fighters and have a force that can bring enough fighters for him to do all of the shenanigans. So you have a Ven 2 with expanded, so you're up to 6, plus a token, you're up to 7, plus Yularen, that's 8 fighters that you can activate. It is hard to get 8 fighters into any list. Like, most of the time you see fighters ranging around the 6 fighter limit, and then sometimes you rack them way up. And if you're bringing like just Y-Wing spam, which is the cheapest Gar fighter, I'd be like, why not Plo Koon? Plo Koon does Y-Wings better than Yularen does. You can activate 8, cool. You can activate like 6 to 7 of them with Plo Koon, so maybe the healing, if you like really double down on Peltas, you can heal fighters up, but I really don't want my fighters taking damage. And if I had a choice between healing fighters and healing ships, I'd probably heal ships instead, because that keeps you on the table, and fighters are kind of throwaway. So that's why I don't really like Yularen. Yularen's on the list of fighter commanders, but he's way down here. And then you have Bale and you have Plo Koon. That's my opinion. Ken, I'm partial for Yularen and Arcs. Yes, I think Luminara and 4 Aces works well. Yes, but my opinion on 4 Aces with Luminara, that's still the power of the ships, not the fighters. We have 2 wrap-ups and house rules. Yep, yeah, so talking about the campaign. Okay, cool. So I'm going to stop there for a second, and we're going to jump back into talking about the game that we played. And if you have any other questions, hit them up. I answer them and ramble. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Okay, here we go. So here is the Corvus, who I just plopped down in the middle of the table, and then I could redeploy. I have my Gazanti, again, middle of the table, because I don't know where Ken's going to go. And then my Super Star Destroyer, which is already reaching across the table and about to touch Ken. So I have to put the Super Star Destroyer down as the 3rd deployment for me. So that means Ken has to have 2 ships already on the table. And with the layout, I need to kill 1 of Ken's ships pretty much to be winning, 2 of them to really be winning, and at that point it's all on Ken. Like, it switches that first player initiative to second player then for who needs to make the engagement. Because the Super Star Destroyer comes down and it will go straight across and kill something. Almost guaranteed. So as soon as I kill something, then the initiative's on Ken to kill something else to even up that point score as it goes up. So people were commenting like, Ken should have flanked my Super Star Destroyer. How? That's honestly my question, is how would you like Ken to do that? He has to have 2 ships down on the table before my Super Star Destroyer touches the table. So I already know where 2 of his ships are, and I'm going to gun straight for them. His Munificents are speed 2, so they don't really do any sort of flanking. They move well, but they're not flankers. because red range out the front of a Super Star Destroyer is a very, very big range. And then the Providence can crash into the side, which is what he did with it, because I couldn't really get it into my front arc while trying to kill the Munificence at the same time. So this is the initial deployment. We are playing Advanced Gunnery because it was unfortunately one of Ken's objectives, and I chose it. So obviously Advanced Gunnery is going to be the Super Star Destroyer for me, which means that I can attack each hull zone on a ship once, which kind of throws off the effect of using salvo, which you see me struggle with as the game goes on. Like, I can attack this hull zone and that hull zone, but now I won't be able to salvo later on, which I really wanted to do because that's kind of the gimmick of the fleet. But attacking multiple times when I normally couldn't is very good. So my plan here is to move pretty much straight across, and if you saw how the obstacles are put, I have this little tiny like runway here of I'll be able to move and not hit an obstacle and land over here by the end of the game, or if Ken's set up over here, I could move across this way, land on the station, and then end up over here. So this is kind of my routes that I made sure were open from the beginning. And then his fleet's just sitting here. I'm going to try to run across the table and attack it. So that's what you see. Ken trying to control his speed so he's at decent range for this first few volleys, and then he's going to try to come around into my side, and I'm going to try to avoid that by killing as much as possible before it gets around my evil front arc. But if you look at my front arc, it pretty much hits anything in that zone. So like this much of the table is like really, really scary, and if you go a little bit closer, which is this blue range, that's a dead range until you can get around it, which makes it very, very difficult. And then we just start shooting, and this is the turn before everything goes wrong for these three ships. After I started attacking Ken, and then he started salvoing me back, and then realizing, wait, I'm going to have to spend more defense tokens now after salvoing because of Palpatine, and he's like, oh, no. And I'm like, my gimmick's working. I don't want to be salvoed. I already am going to take tons of damage because there's nothing I can do about that, and I have really no way to prevent my tokens from being spent out. So I'm going to spend out all yours. And then being first player, this is the problem with Super Star Destroyers as first player. You don't want them to be first player because you get into this situation. If I was not first player and you could activate, you could do a good chunk of damage for me and you could skirt around me. But instead, using those Thrawn dials that I was giving myself to navigate, I can control my speed and my position because they don't turn unless you have a nav dial. You can control your position to try to maximize how many shots. So this ship is already outside of my really, really nice front arc. So basically it's 3 shots here to kill as many of these ships as possible, and then hopefully my auxiliary and rear, I guess, can take care of this ship, and I was very not sure that was going to take place. So I had some really, really hot rolls because it was really good. So I vaporized these 2 ships because I already damaged them, and really it's XI7s. XI7s were the best card to drill damage through when you're rolling like 10 dice. Like, here's 10 damage, maybe. We can't redirect it, so 1 to the side. The most shields that any ship has is 6, so that's 7 damage, and you take 3 hull and probably a crit. Cool. Yeah, I'll take that. So I did that, and then, honestly, what survived the front arc the best out of all 3 of these ships was this little hard cell. Like, who would have thought, right? But it disappeared. After moving, it attacked me, and then I was able to salvo it into its side, and then it rammed me. I was really hoping for this little battle, I think I said so on camera, between the hard cell and the raider. Honestly, my money would have been on the hard cell between it and the raider, because raiders evaporate very quickly. But it would have been a fun little duel, but little hard cell died first. And let's see, where was it? This is actually the move. So I did not think I could kill an advanced gunnery Providence. And Ken didn't think he could kill me. He came close, like really, really close. But this is the point that we talked about after the game. This is where I think he could have done a different maneuver. and it would have been more beneficial toward him because he really needs to like crank right into the side of me to kill me. Like that. And if you see where he moves himself to avoid this obstacle that's right here. And if it was me, he should have landed on it. So he should have taken as harsh of a turn as possible to end up right into my side and cut that distance down extremely quickly and taken that, I believe it's a debris field. Yes, so he would have taken 2 shields. He eventually hits it anyway, but taking those 2 shields up front would have put his ship in a better position to launch more dice into me before I could run away and then keep in 1 arc possibly. Can't guarantee that, but if you look at how it turns, see how where this distance is and it's obstructed. Like if he was sitting on top of this, it wouldn't be obstructed and probably wouldn't have a double arc because this corner would have been kicked farther out that way. Again, it's hard to tell from the pictures, but in my mind, that's what I picture. And then this next one where he lands on it, he would have already taken that damage and he would have been able to be right in my side instead of now he's like in between my rear and my auxiliary arc, so I can double arc him into it instead of just being right in 1 arc. And the Star Destroyer just chugs along, and then this is at the end of the game. Because like right here, I think if he was just a little bit closer, because I think if he turned, he would be farther into my ship, which is hard to tell because it covers so much of the base. But I think that would have been the best bet to get as many dice into me as possible, because after I move a lot of times, we weren't at black range anymore. So he couldn't roll those. Like, the Providence is actually wants to be a close-in brawler. So swinging it in, I think that would have... I mean, I came close to dying at the end of there. Like, he just needed 1 more double arc into me or a couple dice added in over the course of the game, and he would have been able to take me out. Like, I stacked damage quickly. And that's pretty much the game. It was just a slugfest. We just rolled dice against each other, and that was it. So let's take a look at what the ships ended as at turn 6. I was just over halfway. I pretty much had no shields, so he needed, like, that last turn of attacking. Like, I couldn't really redirect, and he would have been in my side. So that would have been probably 6 damage twice, and if he blocked the braces, he could have taken me down pretty much and then ran me in maybe a mutual tabling. No, I still had the Raider. He wouldn't have been mutual tabling, but it would have been close. So yeah, that's pretty much the game. And my thoughts on it. SSDs are really hard to take down. I was actually thinking about it over the weekend, and I have been able to take down SSDs lots of times with the Rebels. Like, I've easily taken them down with Rebels. I made Rebel when SSD came out and everyone was running it super competitively. I came out with my Evil Radis drop that I could kill pretty much any SSD if I rolled even below average on top of turn 3. And I rolled that. You know, it's really fun. In a tournament I did it at Nova, I killed a Super Star Destroyer top of turn 3, and everyone was around me like, whoa, how would you do that? I'm like, no, this is like the only thing this fleet is good against, and there's only like 4 Rebel players here, and this is the only Imperial player I've played all day. And I've been able to take down a Super Star Destroyer with the Republic, and I've been able to take down a Super Star Destroyer with the Imperial. I was actually talking to people on Discord because they were talking about the Executor 2 and how much of a monster that is, because it's like, here's overpowered Star Destroyer out the front, and then like a Kuat on all the sides. Like, it is way powerful with 33 hull. And I was able to take one of those out again, because I run weird jank, top of turn 3 when it first came out, against my friend Jack that went to the LVO and did 16th. And it was basically just a ship build to kill it. It was like a bunch of like Kuats and like one, I think it was an Imperial 2, because I wanted a cheap ship that I had Nina on, or what's her name? The one that gives you the defense retrofit, so I could take an ECM so I could maybe survive the front arc of it, which it barely did. And then it had expanded hangar bay, to bump me up to Squadron 5, and then boarding troopers. So I had 2 interdictors on the side that as soon as you double arc, you disposable capacitor, and between one of them, you should be able to accuracy down the contain eventually to trigger overload pulse. So first attack, they spend their contain, use the defense guy, that lady that cancels out all crit effects. That's the first attack. And then the next attack, you attack again, you accuracy the green contain, and they have to spend out the red one to block you from overloading pulses. Then the next interdictor is like, there's the accuracy, there's the hit, I don't care if I do damage. Spend all of your defense tokens at this point, so all of your defense tokens are done, and then you activate the ISD-1, and you're like, hi, all 5 of your defense tokens are gone, and now all of my Kuats, I think I had 3 of them, are at close range. I guess you die. So I did that, so that was fun, and then we re-racked, and I'm like, let's try this with Rebels, and Rebels don't do well against the Executor too. It's like, that ship's dead, that ship's dead, that ship's a medium ship, it's dead too. That a large ship, I block your brace, you explode. Like, it's pretty brutal. So I got to table him, and then he got to table me, so it was a fun night. So, long story short, I have not fought a Super Star Destroyer with the CIS yet, so that will eventually be on the channel, because I really would like to beat a Super Star Destroyer with all the factions. So I'll have to come up with a gimmick with someone to do that with, and it might be a challenge, because like if you look at the commanders, Dooku doesn't do anything against the Super Star Destroyer, because it doesn't care if it gets raided, because hey, I get a token anyway and I'll do my command anyway, lol, here's a gunnery team into your face. And then like I don't like Trench, so I don't think Trench is the answer. Martuk will be good initially until he has no shields on the front, which is like 2 attacks, and you're probably never going to deplete all the shields. Like, there's so many shield facings, and you just regenerate shields, so you'll never be losing a die. So he might be okay. And then Kraken is like, I would like to get up close to you. And you're like, I actually don't want to get close to the super. Like, I don't want to get into blue range. I really don't want to get into blue range. If I have anything alive, maybe. And then maybe TF. But TF you have to get close to as well. So yeah. I don't know how I would do it. Like, I'll have to brainstorm about that and then have Ken build a super Star Destroyer that I have to try to kill. So that might be in the future. That was a long ramble. Sorry. Okay, so Ken says, fun fact, John deployed Corvus backwards once before redeploying it. I actually normally deploy it backwards, because then it at least reminds me that I need to deploy it again somewhere else. Otherwise, it just immediately flies off the board. Yeah, so Ken is replying back to Skull. Yes, we normally build our fleets for general purpose, as if we didn't know who we were facing. Unless we specifically are like, this is going to be a super squadron battle, so come with squadrons. Because if both players don't bring squadrons steamroll every single time. So we usually talk about that. And Ken has now claimed Yularen for himself, and he will figure it out. I'm fine with that. Thanks for opinions. Next time I try Plo with my arcs. Yularen is fun, but lacking some oomph. Yeah, Plo is just so good, especially if you have like bomber command with arcs, because it's like 2 damage, no redirect, and they're like, I don't want to brace 2 damage, that's kind of useless, so I'll eat 2 damage, and then you're like, okay, here's another attack, 2 damage, block your redirect, and you're like, still don't want to brace that 2 damage, so I guess I have no shields, and they're like, cool, okay, here's 2 damage, block your redirect, and you're like, I contain, take 2 damage, I don't want to brace it. Like, it just gives them terrible choices all the time. So I would highly recommend Plo. But you really need, if you talk about this, if you go back to the episodes that I talk about our Plo games, you need a strategy for annihilating the enemy squadron ball as fast as possible so you can get into bombing. So you need to do a little bit of both. That's why I really like bringing Ahsoka with, like, Ahsoka Officer with Plo Koon, And flight controllers, especially, like, Arcs really like flight controllers, and Ahsoka. And Y-Wings like flight controllers and Ahsoka, because 3-dice snipe. And I also like Ruthless, because, you have all this hull everywhere. So if I can flak, I don't need to do any damage. I just hit one of my Arcs or Y-Wings with 1 point of damage. I don't care. They have tons and they're cheap. Cool. And then you kill all their fighters as fast as possible, and then you just right into killing their ships. So take that into consideration. Minister 2A. Yes, thank you. There's just so many cards I sometimes forget them. Mel. Yes, if they had a super Star Destroyer size ship for the CIS, that would be a really fun game against the Super Star Destroyer. Yeah, Ken calls dice. He always calls dice when he doesn't need to, and it's always like, wouldn't it be funny, like, if you rolled a double and then that crit turns into a structural and you're like, haha, I rolled a double, and then he draws a structural. Like, it's pretty. If there's a talent of guaranteeing yourself to die by calling dice, Ken has that, but he also just rolls doubles like all the time anyway. Have you guys considered doing training videos for different aspects of the game? When I got 2 of my friends to play, I used your Clone Wars one, but dedicated videos would be cool. So that was actually the idea behind Backseat, is me talking through how I build the fleet and then how I've envisioned every turn of the game going. And a lot of times you can see that, like, looking at just the pictures of each round, like, from the beginning of the game, this was my idea of going. So I talk about how I designed the fleet and that why I picked the objective I did for my fleet, usually, or against me, how I set up the battlefield from the beginning with my idea of what I was going to do, and then if I was able to perform it or not. My idea has always been to come up with more strategy-focused things. I just don't have the time. So, like, this, I can dedicate, like, an hour of my time, and I just ramble, and I talk about strategy. If I were to make a dedicated, even, like, a 20-minute video, that would probably be 4+ hours worth of time. And right now, with everything going on in my life, it's like, so do I finish editing the videos for the season? Or do I dedicate time to working on that? Right now, the answer is I have to dedicate time to editing videos for the season, and I don't have time to do this. But I have actually scripted out, let's say it would be a 4-episode series on objectives. It's scripted out. I need to do art and filming of, like, setup on a table with how they play out, and then record it and then edit it, which will be a process, but that's already in the process. So eventually it will happen. Maybe when I'm on, like, baby watching duty and Ken and I aren't getting together, maybe I'll have, like, time in between feeds or diapers or something like that, that I do that while the baby's really young before Ken and I start recording again. So I'm hoping that's in the next couple of months that I'll be able to roll that out. But it's always been a plan, because I have ideas, because I feel like I think of objectives a little bit differently than a lot of people. And it's one of those things, like, I understand it, but getting that garble out of my head so other people can understand it is difficult. So I want to do it right. James, I think one of the things I like most about the channel is that you guys have fun. Yes, we do. And that's really why we still do it. We both really enjoy playing Armada. I hate dice. That's nothing new. But we both like Armada. And we're really good friends. And if you're going to find someone that you want to do something with, find someone that you're a really good friend with. That's the good starting point, and then everything else from there can work out, because Ken and I are great friends, and if we weren't recording Armada, we'd probably still be getting together to play Armada, because that's kind of how the channel started. I met Ken through Armada, which is kind of weird. I've told the story before, but I'll just tell it again. There was a game store like 1 block down from me that I didn't even know existed, because it was in, like, a weird corner. It was, like, one of the busiest intersections in Illinois, and it was on the corner. I didn't know it was there, And at the time, it was like only Masters of the Fleet were producing videos, and then I forgot what his name is. He was out in Pennsylvania, Steve, something like that. I think he switched to Legion, and he no longer produces videos, but he was the only other one that produces videos for Armada, and I was on the forums, and I followed everything. I didn't play the game because there was no one for me to play the game with. I just owned all of it because I enjoyed the game. I enjoyed the concepts of the game. And I saw one day, because I would sort YouTube videos by new, and someone was doing a live stream, and I saw it on the forums, hey, we're doing a live stream, and I was looking at it, and I'm like, Greenfire, Illinois, and then someone, I think it was Ken, who's like, hey, we're in Oak Lawn. I'm like, what? I live in Oak Lawn. Where is this? And I realized after Googling it, this was like, literally, I could walk there if I wanted to. I wouldn't, because it was too busy of an intersection, but I could walk there. So I reached out to them on the forum and then private messenger and talked to the store like, hey, do you guys do Armada? Like, could I come play? And they're like, yeah, we'll set you up. One of our local guys is really into it, and he can do some beginner games with you if you want. I'm like, I don't care what type of games they are. I would just like to play. And that's how I met Ken. We set up a date. Yeah, I had a date with Ken to play Armada. So we set up a date, and we met up, and that's how we met. And they're like, would you guys like to stream your video? And we're like, I don't care. I don't care what you guys do. I just want to play Armada. So that's actually how we first met each other, and we started streaming at the same time, which is weird. And then that game store sadly closed down, and that's why Ken and I are like, maybe we just do this without a game store. And we just, we've already met together, and we've played, like we played one time a 1,200 point game for fun, and we just get together at each other's houses and play games. So why not do that for other people's enjoyment? Because at that point, like, Masters of the Fleet stopped producing videos, and no one was producing videos really for Armada, and no one wanted to produce videos for Armada, because I asked the guys from Can't Get Your Ship Out if they wanted to make a channel with me, and they're like, we're going to stick with the blog. We don't want to do video at this time. I'm like, okay, well, I need someone then to do this with, and Ken's like, I'll do it. And I'm like, cool, let's do this. And so Ken and I are friends from Armada, and now we're like real friends. Like, not like we weren't friends before, but we're like actual friends. So yeah, we have fun on the channel, and we enjoy it. Okay, let's see. Ken's starting to think of SSD builds. Now I actually have to build a CIS list. Great. You should do a video on playing in tournaments, like the difference from playing in local. I'm probably going to go to Adepticon in March. I'll be my first big tournament. So know your fleet. I could make a video. Actually, if you look at way back and you look at my video about my LVO, so it's like 2 years old, I talk about my prep, I believe, for LVO, and then how I did and the different matchups that I did. It's really old. So this is beginning of the channel. I think we were only like 3 months old when I did that. But I'm really out of shape. Not out of shape, but like out of practice for tournament play. The way I play on the channel isn't meant to be tournament play. And I was actually talking about this with Ken, I think, over the weekend. Mainly because of LVO and how we both would like to be there, or Adepticon, and weren't able to be there because, life. But to really be good at competitive play, you have to play the fleet inside and out multiple times in multiple objectives against multiple types of fleets, so then you know how your fleet works. Really, the only thing that you really need to know about Armada competitive is how your fleet works. That's it. Doesn't really matter what your fleet is. There are, tiers of how good fleets are. As you can see, like, Ken and I, we try to match tiers of fleets against each other, because some fleets are way better than others. Like my Z95 Swarm, terrible fleet. Fun concept, and if you practice enough, you would be okay at it, but it's all red dice, so, like, I would stay away from it. But, like, Ken needed a fleet at that level. And then, like, when I bring, like, here's a hyper, this won a tournament list, I tell Ken, bring a tournament level list, like high tier. Like, like there's tiers of lists. So if you bring like a decent competitive list, it doesn't matter what faction it is. It doesn't matter. Onagers. If you bring an Onager and you practice with it, you could win a tournament. But that's another combo. But like if you practice with it, you'll be good enough at it that you can outplay the other player. And Armada a lot of times is determined for the game, like fleet building, prepping, knowing what you're going to be doing on every turn. Like, you don't need to be on the fly type of player to win Armada. That actually doesn't work well for Armada. You need to stick to your plan, stick to your guns, and run your game and wait for your opponent to make mistakes. That's really what you need to think about when you're playing Armada. But like Nick is one of the best fighter players I've ever played against in my entire life. And he played 2-ship for almost 2 straight years. That's a lot. And he, I think, don't quote me, he came like 2nd or 3rd when the 2 of us went to Nova. And that whole tournament was basically 2-ship. And he out 2-shipped everyone else's 2-ship. Why? Because he played it for 2 years. That's the only list he played for 2 years. Like, he would change out one card or a fighter squadron in like 2 years. Like, he would just be like, this is my fleet. And then every single week I would play him, and he would ask me to bring things to try to annihilate his fleet and like to do things against it. So like, I played a lot of Sloane against him because Sloane was like his biggest weakness. So we would play like 2 turns, and I'm like, you know, you're going to lose this because of XYZ. And he's like, yeah, let's re-rack. And then we restart the exact same game with the exact same fleets like 3 times during a night, just so then he would get practice opening and moving his fighters into position to try to counter mine. Like, if you really want to be a dedicated competitive player, you have to have that mindset in you. I don't like playing the same fleet more than maybe twice. So like, that's like my struggle with like taking tournaments really seriously. So I'm a really good Armada player. I'm not a really good tournament player because of that. So like, when I went to LVO and I brought my weird fighter nonsense that you can see me talk about it, I may have played it 5 times before that. 5. So I played it that day almost as many times as I had ever played it, which I did fine. I was practiced with it. I knew how I wanted it to work, but I wasn't proficient in it. There's a difference between practice and proficient. Like Nick, he played that for 2 years. He is proficient in that list, and he is extremely good at knowing exactly what he can do with it because he's literally played everything with it. I get bored, and I like building other fleets. That's why our channel is a variety show of fleets. That's why, as of the end of Season 4, between Season 3 and Season 4, you will see every single commander in Armada played in a list. So if you wanted to be like, how would I play this commander? You can look it up and be like, this is what they did. And then Season 4 and 5, we're going to switch, and then you'll see every single commander played again. You don't see the same commander over and over and over again. I like Thrawn. I'm not going to play Thrawn every single week. It gets boring. It gets boring to watch. I like variety. So I could make a video, but I'm not necessarily the best competitive player to go off of on that. I have a lot of high concept ideas on Armada. Not really tournament, because I don't like playing the same list over and over again. So hopefully that answers you. I'm probably not going to make a video on specifically tournaments. I can do high concepts on tournaments, but not necessarily, because it gets nitty gritty. Like, play the fleet until you hate it. That's really what you need to do to prepare for it. And if you're coming into Adepticon, which would be fun, Ken's still trying to figure out if he's going to go to Adepticon to hang out. So keep an eye out for talking about that, because we live right here in the Chicagoland area. So welcome. I think it actually scrolled quite a bit. I was rambling for a while. If you play about 100 games against John, you can figure out his brain garble. That is true, Ken. And then you already told people that you might be at Adepticon. Cool. Yeah, party time. Cool. Really? You're close to us then. That's kind of crazy. Yeah, 4 hours. That's like roughly Wisconsin / part of Michigan, most of Indiana from us. You should do a video. I already read that. Luxembourg. Welcome. Andy, how are you doing today? I'm only friends with John for his Armada ships. Oh, Ken. Yeah, remember your triggers, your own ships. Know when to fight and to run away and take your time. That is some very good advice. So I've talked about this before. Again, like tournament play is different because you're thinking about points and margin of victory and how can I score as many points in this match to progress as possible. So if you look at the cutoff for LVO, top 16 moved on. So what does that mean to do to end up in the top 16? That means you need to every single round get a 6 or a 7. You barely need to win and you get into day 2. Because I think the day 2 cutoff was, give me a second, I can look this up in a second and I can tell you. This is basically what you want me to talk about probably. No thank you, I don't want to connect to PlayStation. Where is that list? Apparently a lot of people have talked since I clicked on this last. Day 1 finals. Let me download this PDF real fast. I know this is really entertaining to watch me open files. Okay, so the top 16 players. 16th player scored 24 points. So let's divide that by 4 rounds. That's 6 points per round. So that means if you win each round by 1 point, you move on to the finals. That's all you have to do. You basically have to try to just not get tabled. That's it. And knowing that, to get into the day 2, because day 1 and day 2 are very different. Day 2 is how can I maximize my points as much as possible and win. You basically need to win each round 10-1 to win a tournament. Versus day 2, or day 1, which is how can I minimize my losses to move into the next round. I need 4, 6, 5s in my favor, or a 7. Like if I get an 8 and then I 6, 6, 6 after that, I'm in day 2. Almost guaranteed, because other players, like the way the points work, 50, like you should be, like you just need to be in that top cut. So when you're looking at that, it's like know when to retreat and know when to take a loss. And so like we don't do that on the channel because this is for your entertainment. So Ken and I will suicide our ships into each other all day long because it's fun to watch. But like honestly, like tournament play, you're like, I kill that ship, I run. You fly a fighter into me, I kill it, and I fly away. I win by 12 points because I killed that fighter. That's tournament play. And it's very mental, like we're trading points and it's done. And so like there are games that I will sit on my side of the table as second player, drop to speed 0, and dare you to come across to me. Because I just need a win. Doesn't need to be a big win, doesn't need to be spectacular, but the longer I can delay you, like, so when I say like in Solar Corona and things that the first player deploys first, you better be deploying in the middle of the table. If you choose a corner, I will choose the other corner and I will sit at speed 0 and it will take you 4 turns to get across the table to me, and I don't care because I'm winning automatically. So you need to take that in consideration. Like, you don't need to win big, you just need to win. And you don't take cards that allow the other opponent to farm points. And sometimes it's better to just have a player kill you than farm points off of you. An example of this is at one of the Chicago regionals, I played this gentleman. He's from Indiana, and I forget his name, even though I've played a lot with him. But I haven't seen him in like 2+ years. He was one of the crazy people that would run Leia with John from Can't Get Your Ship Out, and I lost. Like, it was like turn 2, and he was running this big / B-wing ball, and I slowed or 2-shipped into him, and I lost all my fighters, and I'm like, well, I lost. And my Quasar had already committed to turning into him, and my Star Destroyer's like, peace, I'm going the other direction because I need to keep those 150 some points on the table. So he attacked me with B-wings into a blank shield section, and I had full defense tokens. And he rolled, he's like, 3 damage. And he's like, now you can use your defense tokens. I'm like, I don't. You gain 1 token and my ship is now on 2 health. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Because he realized that he was going to get a 6, or yeah, basically he was going to get a 6/5 out of me. And then if he kills the Quasar, he gets a 7/4. but he really should be getting a 9-3 from token farming. So he was using Bomber Command to roll double hits into blanks, hopefully, to allow me to not to like maximize how much damage he could do against me. And I was like, whatever, kill my ship. 2 points, 2 command tokens. So I used my defense token. So when he rolled down in his dice pool to like 1 damage, thinking that he was going to get it, I just redirected to a shield side. I'm like, okay, hit me with some damage and then I'll let it go through. And then so instead of farming like the 6 damage, I think a Quasar is, right? 6. Instead of farming 6 tokens off of me for like 100 plus points, he got 2 because his B-Wings attacked me, did 3 damage. I did nothing to it and allowed all the damage to come through. So like you have to like take that into consideration with the objectives. Like sometimes you have to game the system while losing to deny your opponent points, so then you maximize your points. Sorry, I've been just rambling. Oh, cool. So Michigan. Awesome. Yeah. 2-day versus 1-day tournaments and local tournaments for big tournaments are very different because a lot of times you start to learn who your local players are, and you can counter that, and then you go into the real world. Like you show up at, so if you look at like the difference between the last 2 quote unquote main tournaments that have been played, like if I think, what is it? It was the Texas Open that would replace LVO the previous year, later in the year. Like that was a small tournament. It was only like maybe 16, 20 players. Like that's not a lot. Like there's a store up here that gets like 10 players a week. So like that's just a normal day at the store. So like that's not a big tournament, and the sample size of what the fleets were very small. I think like there was 1 Onager fleet. Like that's not super competitive. Like I looked at the list and I'm like, none of this is really competitive. And then you go to LVO and you're like, oh, these are hardcore. These are really good players. Like these are legit lists. Like the competition's much different when it's like big stakes tournament. And that's what Adepticon's going to be. You're going to have people that they refer to as SEALs that come in with like non-competitive lists because they just want to play Armada, and that's fine, and they should be able to come play Armada. But then you have people that are coming like, I've been practicing this list the entire time coronavirus has been around. Let's rumble. And that's really, really difficult. So that's kind of my thoughts. I've been rambling way longer than I normally do today. And I actually have a few announcements to make. So last week I said that Ken was going to release the Madness video. He had some computer issues, and then the file had like an error in it, so that was frustrating. So it took him longer to render, and then we didn't want to release that right into our next video release because YouTube algorithm and thing like that. So coming out this week, whenever Ken gets around to it, so it might be Tuesday or Wednesday, we're going to be releasing the Madness countdown video, so you can see all the fleets. There's already a post of which admirals made it into the tournament and then who should be bracketed up against each other, so you should check that out. And just for fun, fill out a bracket and then send it into us on the March Madness. And like, there's no prizes, but bragging rights, and bragging rights are worth a lot of points of like who can predict how the thing was going to go as soon as you see that video. So you can see what the lists are and you're like, I put my money on that list and that commander, and let's see what takes place. So that's the first announcement. And then the spoilers, I already gave it away earlier in the video, but this coming up week we have a fighter showdown for episode 8. It's going to be Sloan versus Riken, because I think we've only flown Riken like once or twice on the channel, and I'm like, I kind of want to fly him again with fighters, because last time I did it, it was like a Neb B gun line, which is memey, but let's actually take it seriously, and let's see what happens with this. So that's what's going to be coming out this week. That will be a fun one to talk about, because I love squadron battles, so there's a lot to talk about both of our fleets. Because Ken's running Sloan, who's my favorite, so I can critique that well. And then Riken is one of my least favorite commanders, so I'll critique that as well. So both of those battles should be fun. Let's see, some things were just posted. I'll touch on those and then wrap up. I'm doing surgery on my computer, minimally a post with links to fleets tomorrow morning. Okay, so Ken's still working on it. Yeah, usually for me at least, I've always considered anything not an 8-3 isn't even a win, so playing to lose small is a different mindset. Yes, it is. So it actually helps you in like, let's knock my mic out, in like the campaign. So if you look at like the campaigns that we do, spoilers to that for I think Jacob, who should be checking that out later tonight, but like that's kind of the mindset of the campaign. You don't need to win big. It doesn't matter how much you win, you just need to win. And sometimes that becomes really, really gamey when you're like, okay, you fly your Z95 toward me, I kill it, and I run away. You fly your TIE Fighter toward me, I kill it, and I win by 8 points. So that's one of those things, like, you see on our channel, a lot of people are like, well, Ken got tabled. Well, yeah, because he didn't run away, because we're a channel that's all about rolling dice and ships exploding. So he's going to continue trying to score points the entire game up until all the ships explode. That's what happens. Or when I've lost and I'm like chasing down, like, what was it, the one game that I rammed my onager, or was it a Quasar, into his ship, exploiting it on the last turn, leaving him on 1 health? Would I normally do that? Absolutely not. That made no sense. Why would I fly my onager or my Quasar into his fighter swarm trying to kill his last ship? That made no sense. You wouldn't do that. But what it is it's fun to watch because it's dramatic and it's dice rolling. So take it at what it's valued. But yeah, playing to lose when you're losing in a tournament and then not tilting is kind of important. So we'll leave it at that. Try not to tilt. I tilt dice. Yeah, roll dice, explode ships. That's what's fun. So until next time, I'm John. Ken's in the chat. Thank you very much for watching and interacting with us. Check out our videos and stuff that are taking place later this week. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like, comment on any of our stuff. Join us on Discord. We're always talking about different things. And until next time, I'm John, and this has been Ion Radio.